Yeah.
Great. You haven't seen your dad yet? Oh, okay. Good.
Okay. So you're gonna look at me.
I look at you.
Yeah, you're talking to me. Okay, cool. Who are you?
My name's Fred Sclafani. I'm
And
number 11 of Tony and Josephine Sclafani. We are in Las Vegas having our first family Sclafani Finazzo reunion.
this is the first.
First.
Why did it take so long?
Well, I come across my great nephew that I had never seen, and my great nephew that I hadn't seen and my nephew that I hadn't seen in 50 years, and it was such a great meeting that I had with them that we thought that I went home and I told my wife about it, and I says, you know what, we got cousins out there that people don't even know one another. I says, and I think it would be great to put out a notice, and because of Facebook. We threw it out there, and we got some good feedback on it, and so we decided to draw it up and make the party.
And how did it go?
Well, it started off slow, but we had a good response. We ended up with figuring somewhere around 300, 350 people that we figured that was in the family. And we started getting good responses and people saying, oh yeah, great idea. So we started planning it, and so my wife did the majority of the work with some help from her sister-in-law Frances, and a couple of the nieces got involved with the videotaping of pictures and stuff like that, and drawing up invite off the format of invite on Facebook. And they started coming in, and people started sending us the checks in, and we just went from there, and it all fell together.
Did you recognize a lot of the names that were coming up?
The names that were coming up were all recognized, yes. And faces is where the problem was at. I put out a little quote on Facebook to please send us pictures, any pictures, young, old, and whatever. The majority of the pictures that we were getting were old. Some of those pictures were hard to detect who was who, but the younger pictures we knew, even though I hadn't seen them in a long time. For some reason, I seem to have known who most of the people were, especially on the Sclafani side. The Finazzo side was a little bit harder because there wasn't that much of a contact between the two families. Once the parents have all deceased, the family started spreading apart, and that was another reason we came up with the idea of having a family reunion.
And what do you know about the parents that first came off the boat?
Well, our parents came over in the early 20s. I think they came right after they got married in Sicily, Cinisi, and they came to America. They had uncles here. Some of the uncles were from my father's mother's side, the Finazzo side. My grandmother was a Finazzo, my grandfather was Sclafani, and that's how the family ties together. And they came in and went to St. Louis, and at those times, as immigrants come into the United States, they were sponsored by a family member, and it was that family member's responsibility to take care of them as a immigrant to the United States. And it was their job to feed them, house them, and teach them how to speak English, which they did. My dad was in St. Louis for several months, but he was unable to get the employment that he wanted. The only available employment there was with railroad. And so he had a cousin that lived in Detroit, so they moved, my dad and my mom moved to Detroit, and that's where they settled. And then half of the children were born, well actually all of them, except for one, were born in downriver Detroit. And my dad worked in the steel mills there, and when he was having a lot of problems with arthritis because of the cold weather, well, when they opened up the steel mill in Southern California, some of the upper management requested him to come out, and he moved out to Southern California, and then we all came after that. And that's how we ended up in Southern California. And then from there, we kind of just spread out everywhere.
And how many of there are you?
through the two families, the Finazos and the Sclafanis, we think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 350.
It's huge.
It's a big family.
Do you think that's a Catholic thing, or?
Well,
Why do you think it's so big?
I think it was cold winters. You know, they used the rhythm system, but I don't think they understood it. You know, in those days there wasn't the birth control as we have today, but the rhythm system was the only way, and I don't think they understood it, and I don't think they cared.
Do you think they still maintain the Italian heritage?
The first generation, second generation, yes, but after the second generation, all those different things that the families did have all gone by the wayside. It's not like it used to be. No, you know, once we lost all of our aunts and uncles, the second generation tried to go. Well, they didn't try. They became more Americanized, and they started going away from the old country's traditions. And because if you look at the second generation, they're all named, especially in the naming of the children, they're all named after family members. Well, now in the second, the third, and the fourth generation, they name them after a star on television. You know, and so the names are not the same as they used to be. So that old tradition is kind of gone. The respect for your elders is kind of gone. That was a big thing with the old folks. There was a lot of respect. I know that we were not allowed, as we were growing up, to call anybody by their first name. We had to call them Mr. or Mrs. or something to that effect.
No pa
Or aunt or uncle. We couldn't use just first names. Today they call you dude. So, you know, it could be your nephew, hey dude, you know, and it's just not the same.
Yeah, it's not.
So we've all become Americanized.
What do you think about that?
I don't like it. I like the old traditions. I think the old traditions are good. I think it was things that the family built within you, and when you carry something on from one generation to another, I think it's a good idea. Traditions are good, and we've lost them.
Do you think that's the nature of like America now, or do you?
I do. I think the society today has a lot to do with the old traditions. They just don't look at them as the same.
What are some of the things that you did as a kid that you might have considered an old tradition?
Well, I do know one thing, that when we sat down to eat, we all ate at the same time. We were all at the table at the same time. I can remember being late for dinner. My dad, within a half an hour after he was home, we usually ate at the table, and everybody was around there. And if we were late, we were in trouble for being late, because when my dad wanted to eat, we ate. And with the group that we sat down there, I always have this problem with my wife. She says I eat too fast. And the problem is that we were growing up, if you didn't eat fast, you didn't get any seconds. So the faster eater got the seconds. So that's a big tradition there. Another tradition that has gone by the wayside is that every Sunday was spaghetti dinner at Mom and Pa's house. And the family all came over for that now. And today, you're lucky if you can even have dinner with your family anymore, unless it's a birthday, holiday, or something like that. So those are probably the two most traditions that I miss a lot of.
What do you know about the first immigrants as a family? Why did they leave Italy?
Well, they all left because they come to America because they were all paved with gold, you know. And the Finazzo family was the first family that came over prior to the joining of the two families. And they're the ones that settled in St. Louis, and the majority of them worked for the railroad.
And so they thought it was prosperity and
Prosperity and advancement. I'm so glad that my parents came over from the old country, because when I go back to the old country and look at what they have compared to what we have here in this country, there's no comparison. This country is so much further ahead than the rest of the world. And it's a good feeling to know that they came here for a reason. You know, they were, I don't know, I think they were something like 6 months married when they came here, and neither one of them could speak English. My dad went to work right away and worked all of his life up until he retired, and then he only lasted 5 years after he retired. But he was a strong provider. He taught us how to provide because we had such a large family within the family. We all contributed by our works. Everybody brought their checks home, and all the checks went to Ma, and Ma took care of the bills. She took care of everything. She had two daughters who helped her, but she did all the cooking. She paid all the bills, and she did probably everything. And one story that I know of in Italy, in Michigan, when she was given birth, and she was downstairs in the basement washing clothes, and she was ready to deliver, and at that time they had midwives, so she went upstairs to the third floor. She gave birth to the baby, and then after they got her cleaned up and everything, she went back downstairs to the basement and finished washing the clothes. And today, women, they go home, they have to stay in a bed for 3 or 4 days, and they got to have 6 months off of work, and they just don't make women like they used to.
Was that pretty typical that they would give birth and then be
I
out?
think a lot of the old people that come from the old country were that way. They were very strong women, and the women in the old country that came here are the really nuts of the family. They held everything together. Everything was dwelled around the mother, and father was there, but it was mostly the mother that kept everything together.
And so, if that's the case, how does it play into when Dad wants to eat, we ate? Like how does the female-male dynamic in the parents?
Well, one thing I never heard my mother and father disagree about anything. I imagine they might have made comments behind the closed door, but whatever my dad wanted, my mother did, and it was kind of vice versa. But it was mostly whatever my dad wanted, my mother did, and she knew when he wanted to eat, and she had the food ready to go when he sat down to eat. So it's a good to me. I think it's a good tradition that we have lost. That respect of the family in the house.
What do you take away from what your father has instilled in you, and same with your mother?
One of the biggest things is respect. I respect my people that I deal with. I respect the elders that I have in contact with. I'm a contractor in Vegas, and I have done jobs with people because of my trust in them, their trust in mine. We've made deals just off of handshakes, and that's my biggest thing that I've taken from my dad is the respect of others.
And your mom?
Well, I don't know how to cook. That's why I married my wife. But my mother was a great cook, and of course we ate a lot of spaghetti. It was always cooked a different way. Today they call it soup, but we used to call it our main course. But whatever she had to cook, there was nothing that we didn't like. I mean, even when she cooked something you didn't like, it was still good. I can remember eating fava beans, and of course I would always push my fava beans on the plate to one side, and then my dad would make me eat them by themselves because there was no more pasta to eat with them. So I'd have to eat the fava beans by myself. You couldn't leave anything in the plate, whether you liked it or not. Yeah.
That was me with lima beans. I would keep them. And lima beans are fava beans, pretty much, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Pretty much.
Pretty much the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a fan of those things.
But,
Future.
Tradition is a big thing.
What do you think about the future of the Sclafani Finazzo?
Well, I'll tell you, I've ran across some cousins that I've met here, and I have not met anybody that I haven't been proud to say they're part of the family. So I think the tradition, as long as they can stay close to one another, that the family will just do nothing but grow and stay. And I think they'll stay tight. There's that Italian bond that we have that it really doesn't have anything to do with what you say. That bond keeps you together, whether you like the person or not. You know, it's a good feeling to know that you got family members out there that are going to stay together.
And what do you hope of this reunion?
To meet people and get other people to meet other people that they've never seen before or don't know. And you know, today when you're down into the second, third, fourth cousins, you know, some people don't even look at them as family members, you know. But I looked at them as family members, and I wanted to know who was who, and that was the big thing. And I'm glad to see it. The little gathering we had yesterday was so warming to me to find people that I have never seen before and met, to get to meet them again. We had a situation here a couple of years ago that we met by phone call. We found a name in the phone book, and his name was Juan Sclafani. So we called him, and we left a message, and he called me back, and we started talking. I said, we have the same last name. I was just curious if we were related. So we were talking. He told me that his family came from Nicaragua, and they left Nicaragua when the communists took over the country, and they settled in San Jose, California. So he was naming some of his brothers and sisters, and I said, well, where'd you come from? He said, well, I left New Orleans when I was 2. Well, as soon as he said that, then I knew that we were related. I says, we had a cousin named Pete that left New Orleans and went somewhere to Central America. And he said, that's my dad. And it was really warming to know that you met somebody that you've never seen before. Yeah, it gives you a good feeling, yeah. And since then, we've become very close. The family talks about their dad, Pete. He says, yeah, you got a big family, but they don't like us. And he used to tell them all the time. But they didn't believe him because he never brought any family members together. So when my wife and I had our 25th wedding anniversary, they invited the whole family, and his whole family. And he had 12 kids. He's got 6 boys and 6 girls. And he brought his whole family. And my brother Sam and Pete, his dad, they were real close when they were in Michigan. And they hadn't seen each other in 50 years. So it was a great warming experience to get these people back. And now some of them are here, and they've never met anybody. And they didn't even realize the difference between the Finazzos and the Sclafanis, how the tie went together. They thought there was just Sclafanis. They didn't know about the Finazzos. So now they're finding out they have a whole second different family that they knew nothing about. So it's really good. It's really.
So any other share-worthy tidbits?
Well, yeah, I like the fact that the families that we have our ups and downs in our families too. You know, the majority of them had all good marriages, long-lasting marriages. That we've had some problems, and there's been some divorces, but they're not divorces where they're enemies at one another. The family has all stayed together. They still see the father, the mother and the father still have communications between one another, and it's that's what keeps a family together, is that warm tie of everybody. So that's a big thing.
That's awesome. And I guess the Americanization of the Italian families, the way they pronounce the name, to losing traditions, to what? Just go ahead and expound on that for me.
Well, it's just when you like something, and and I just like to do that. I know that when we got our two children, we named our daughter Rosalia, and my mother was Josephine, but we named her Rosalia after my aunt, and because my aunt and my uncle Joe, they did so much when my wife and I got married. They did all the cooking for our wedding and everything, and we had almost 500 people at our wedding, and they did all the cooking, and so we felt a special bond between my aunt and my uncle, so we named our daughter Rosalia after her, and my mother kind of got a hard feeling over that because we didn't name her Josephine, but after a while she accepted it and everything was fine. But I like the old type family traditions that we used to have, and America is kind of separated. Now they're talking about that's what keeps a family together, but I don't know if it's too late. Sometimes you just waited too long. But
What do you mean by waited too long?
well, the traditions, once they get away from one another, it's like in a relationship. You have a problem and you don't see them for a couple of 2-3 weeks. The further you get away from that relationship, the easier it is not to come back. And if you stay close to it and you get your problem solved, you can actually take a relationship back to where it was. But as they separate and that's one of the reasons I like the reunion, is because we're talking 3-4 generations here that have never met one another. And like this reunion here, we have the girl that caught my wife's bouquet at our wedding. She's here, and I I asked her. I said, "Well, how did the flowers bring you any good luck?" She looked at her husband. She said, "Well, we're going on 43 years." So it's nice to be like that. So it's but that's pretty much the whole thing. Yeah.
And introduce yourself again.
My name is Fred Sclafani. I'm the number 11 of 12 of Antonio and Josephine Sclafani.
That's you're technically first generation American.
First generation American, yeah.
Okay.
And I always call myself an American before I call myself Italian.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
What's the theory behind that?
Well, because this country is, they say we're built on immigrants, but once you're born here, you're no longer an immigrant, to me anyhow. So this is my country. Even though I have an Italian heritage, I still am American first. So,
All right. Thank you for sharing.
thank you. Okay.
Cat.